So I get asked frequently, why would I start a new business after having successfully sold my first company for nearly $500 million? The fact is that while that previous company, the people within it, and the things that we did were highly successful, and we were very, very fortunate to have achieved the things that we achieved, as well as we put in a lot of hard work that got us there. The things that we achieved there were eye opening for me as a professional, as a business owner, and as somebody who was just getting into business for the first time on my own, truly. And what I realized as I got into working with organizations that were very, very large, working with companies like Starbucks, Walmart, Amazon, Google, and the list goes on, is that even these great, amazing companies with great, amazing people didn't have the tools and resources needed in order to effectively do their job. And in fact, in some situations, these organizations weren't able to comply with or follow the laws because they didn't have the tools needed to actually follow the law. Now, the great thing about these organizations is they cared enough about it to actually invest the time and money in order to fix that. So, as I sold that tax company, which was focused on tax compliance, which is just simply following the tax laws, it occurred to me that there's an entire area adjacent to this that also needed attention, and that's HR compliance or HR laws. And that was the birthplace of HR Law Made Easy. It was an effort for us as a group of professionals who had solved tax compliance to come into a separate area adjacent or next to it, which is HR compliance, and solve those problems as well. Not surprisingly, much like the tax laws, there are thousands and thousands of individual laws that exist at a state and federal level. In fact, when you add them all up on the HR side, there's over 1.5 million HR laws in the US. Rewind time by about 100 years, and there were nearly 800,000 fewer laws. There's been a little bit of legislation and or new laws that have come out in that time. So, with this giant bucket of laws that are out there, just like with the tax compliance company that I created previously, I knew that the only way to tackle this once and for all was to have a team of individuals who were trained in having to confront, look at, read, understand large volumes of law in order to simplify it and use it in day-to-day business operations. And that's what we did with HR Law Made Easy's compliance checklists. So the very first step for us was we had to go out and get every single law. Now, once we had those laws, and we knew we could maintain them. We then had to go through every one of those laws, read them, understand them, and actually create a list of things that a company needs to do based on where they're operating in the US. And the things that need to be done are different based on the locations in which you operate. So the things that I need to do in a state like Florida are going to be very different than the things that I need to do in a state like California. There's some overlap, especially at the federal level, but there are going to be differences at that state or local level. So we needed to create compliance checklists for every location in the US, which is what we did, which is a first step as you're trying to get compliant with the law. If nobody has a list of things that you need to do, then you're left wondering, did I do all the things I need to do in order to follow the law? So the very first step was we had to create compliance checklists ticked and tied to the laws so that when those laws update or change, we can notify customers or clients of ours about those changes, and your organization or those organizations can actually continue to stay compliant, because it's not a one and done. It's I need to create a list of things I need to do. I need to get compliant, and then I need to make sure that I'm able to maintain that compliance over time, which is why our team updates the laws, and that information feeds directly into those checklists. So the system, HR Law Made Easy, will email you and let you know, here are the changes to the checklist and the locations in which you operate. Here are the things that now need to be done, or here are the things that now need to be changed. So you're never out of compliance. It's really, truly for the first time putting compliance on automatic or on autopilot. A lot of organizations have talked about this concept or doing this, but without the laws themselves, you can't pull this off. It's simply guesswork. So step one was compliance checklists. Now, as you create a list of things to do, what comes with that are all the challenges of doing the things on that list. How do I create a compliant employee handbook, for example? How do I have available to me all of the policies that I need to have inside of a handbook legally in order to check the box that I'm following the law based on whatever the law says I need to do in those policies? Well, the next thing we needed to create were tools and resources, almost like a tool chest available to companies to actually take that checklist and then right inside of our platform, click a button and go do the thing that's listed there. So examples of that would include compliant employee handbooks. We took it a step further because nobody reads handbooks. Very few people read handbooks. Even the lawyers that create handbooks often don't like reading the handbooks that have been created. So we took it a step further and we went beyond just simply text-based employee handbooks, which we've got, and we created handbook presentations, which are an easy, fast, effective way to get those rules and policies into the eyes, ears, and minds of your employees. So gone are the days of handing somebody some dusty old tome that nobody's going to read, and replace that with an actual engaging presentation that people can watch, listen to, and understand. So while we have an employee handbook creator, and that employee handbook creator creates physical handbooks that you can read, distribute, email, we also have handbook presentations that you can send out to your employees. They can watch it on their phone, on their computer, and or you can bring them into a conference room and they can watch it together. And finally, and for the first time, individual employees get through the handbook actually understanding the policies that are in it, because the presentations are really simplified so that anybody can understand them. And they're in multiple languages, whether that's English, Spanish, and so forth. So that was one of the tools that we knew we had to create in order to make sure that companies could stay compliant with the HR laws. The other tools that we had to create were actually in the form of documents and other value added tracking, record keeping parts of our website. So let me walk through this. We first discovered that most organizations struggle with tracking compliance. And what I mean by that is that there's kind of a multiple step process to compliance. I might go create a handbook and I may feel really good that I now have a compliant handbook. Well, that document sitting on a shelf doesn't equal legal compliance, because in some states and in some locations, we also have the added step of employees having to read it, understand it, and letting us know either by signature or some document that they communicate to us that they understood it, that they actually got that information, absorbed it, and understood it. So how do we track that? So we created something called an employee portal. And the employee portal is simply a location where we can distribute information to our employees and track whether or not the employees did the things that we sent to them, whether that's reading an individual policy, whether it's getting through a handbook presentation, whether it's an individual document that we need to send out to them that they need to read and understand and sign. All of that is tracked in the portal. That includes training, which we've got inside of our platform as well. So finally, for the first time, there's a single portal, a single location that employees can go to. It's just a website that they can log into, and all of the information that they need to review is there. And then on the back end, on your side, you're able as an organization to go immediately into that and to see who's done what, who is actually complied with or is following the law based on the things that we've asked them to do. So this was another tool that we had to create for organizations in order to actually follow that checklist, because it's not enough to just give somebody a handbook and say, hey, good luck getting everybody to sign it. How do I track that? Well, I have no idea. Well, now we've provided a solution for that. So there's actually a portal that you can send employees to that can access that information, or you can track that information if you want to distribute those things through some other software. So that was another key thing that we needed to create within the HR Law Made Easy platform. One of the other things was a giant document library, because stuff comes up all the time. You'll have somebody come in and request time off, or they'll request leave for some reason, whether it's a family member is ill or whether they're maybe serving in the military. All of these requests that come in legally have to be handled specific ways. So we created documents and procedures within the platform that make it easy for you to comply with these laws that need to be followed when these requests come in. Leave or time off based on an actual valid reason that a person is legally allowed to bring to you, and then you actually as a company have to allow them to do these things. Leave as a topic is a very complicated one, and it gets even more complicated if you are operating across multiple states. So having specific procedures, having the denial letters when you deny leave for valid reasons, having the approval letters when you approve leave for valid reasons, all in one place where you're not having to go create all this or to try to find it online, makes it a lot easier to comply with the laws. Also in the platform, we needed to create offer letters, hiring guides, termination guides, the steps that need to be followed when you let somebody go or somebody is leaving the organization, the steps you need to follow when somebody is brought on board or you're onboarding somebody in the organization. All of these individual rules that need to be followed, and there are many of them, are easily followable because we've created these guides, procedures, and processes, as well as all the documents needed in order to comply with the law, whether that's a compliant legal agreement, employment agreement, whether it's a compliant non-disclosure agreement or severance agreement. All of these documents are in the platform because it's not enough to just have a list of things on a checklist that need to be done. You also need the tools available to you to actually do those things easily as an organization. And that's why the HR Law Made Easy system was created, to have everything you need in one location in order to know what things I need to do to follow the law, as well as here are all the tools and resources completely at your disposal to actually follow that checklist and get it done. One of the neat things that we created as we were developing the software was a team of professionals that support organizations, because in many instances, smaller companies or even larger companies don't have the time or resources inside their organization to do all the things on a checklist to make sure that the company is set up and compliant. So we have an entire team that's available to come in and to partner with your organization to actually go through the individual steps that need to be done, make sure that you've got all of these legally compliant steps in place or documents or other things that need to be done. And they work with your team collaboratively, or our team just does it for you and sets it all up for your organization. Using our platform, we're able to do that easily, effectively, and accurately. Without the platform, it would be nearly impossible, or it would take years, truly. So the HR Law Made Easy platform is not just software, though it is software. It's also a team of individuals that you have access to come in and help you get these things done within your organization. Now, beyond some of the things that we already talked about as it relates to compliance, there's also some things like posters and notices. You may remember these. They get emailed to you and or mailed to you, and you have to put them up on a wall within your organization if you have a physical location, or you somehow need to magically distribute it to your people if your people are remote. Well, we've solved that. We've gone out and grabbed every one of the over 3,000 unique, yes, there's over 3,000 unique posters and notices that exist in the US. We have them all digitally available, kept up to date, and you can send them out to your people and track that they've actually looked at them, viewed them. Again, this is part of compliance, is making sure that you're not just doing the things that you've been asked to do, but that you can actually prove it later on if somebody comes to you and says, well, did you send out these notices and posters or not? So we have all of those notices and posters available in digital form that can be distributed to your people, and you can track and prove that your people actually looked at them, which is really critically important. May not seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal. And it's one of the things that lawyers often use to try to find a kink in the armor to come at you to try to extort money out of your organization. It's not to pick on lawyers. I'm a lawyer, but it's true. Most lawyers that come after organizations are not winning cases because you've done something terrible. Most lawyers are winning cases because they're able to find a list of things that you didn't legally do. And we all know how that's going to play out in court. The moment that a lawyer can prove that you weren't following the law and they present that to a judge is not going to be friendly with you as an organization, no matter what the claim was against your organization. That information is going to be used as ammunition to point the finger at you as a bad company that isn't following the law. That court case isn't going to go well. So we wanted to make sure that you had all these tools available to you to really close down all of these opportunities that could take advantage of by attorneys that come after you. Speaking of which, beyond compliance, beyond following the law, HR Law Made Easy has a unique library within it, which is a risk reduction library. Now, this library is very different than the rest of the platform. The rest of the platform is focused on making sure that you're following required HR laws, that based on the locations in which you operate, that you have all of the information available to you to know what to do, as well as all the tools available for you to follow and or use in order to stay compliant with the law. Well, the risk reduction area of the platform is a bit different. Now what we've done is we've looked at what are the other things that your organization can do that are not legally required, but that your organization can do to reduce litigation risk or to reduce risk for your company. Now, this is very different in that we're no longer talking about things that you legally have to do. We're now talking about things that are best practices or things that are really smart to do in order to reduce lawsuit risk. Let me give you an example. One of the worst lawsuits that a company can have arrive at their door is a lawsuit called negligent hiring. Now, negligent hiring is a situation where your organization interviews an employee or interviews a candidate, later hires them, they're now an employee. They come into your organization and they do a bunch of bad things. Now, that could be that they do bad things to fellow employees. It could be that they do something bad to a customer. They just do something bad. And they had a track record or a history of doing these bad things before they joined your organization. So the lawsuit called negligent hiring, which means that we were negligent, we didn't do the things that we were supposed to do in order to be responsible or able to avoid bad things. We could have predicted that this would have happened if we had just done our homework or if we'd done background checks. Negligent hiring is one of these things that really has everything to do with hiring somebody without really looking into their background, without really digging in and asking the right questions in an interview, calling and actually talking to references, doing background checks. Now, the things I've just mentioned are not legally required in most organizations. We're not legally required to ask questions that would uncover these background issues. We're not legally required to reach out and do background checks. We're not legally required to call and talk to references or people that they previously worked with. These aren't things that are required in most states or at a federal level. So negligent hiring as a lawsuit can really only be prevented if your company is actually looking at a list of other things, best practices, risk reduction steps that could be taken to reduce the likelihood of that particular lawsuit. One of the worst things about negligent hiring lawsuits is that often they're really high up in the six figures. And I mean like $4, $5, $6, $700,000 lawsuits or settlements, some of which are over $1 million. Some of the worst have been, I'm not kidding, over $1 billion. So negligent hiring lawsuits are one of the worst lawsuits that can be brought against a company, and there's nothing legally required for you to do to prevent them. So as we were building out the HR Law Made Easy platform, we knew we had to go beyond simple compliance. I say simple compliance, it's pretty complicated. There's a lot involved, but we knew we needed to go beyond just compliance. We knew we actually needed to look at all of the lawsuit types that exist and provide to organizations a list of those things that you can do to reduce risk that are not required, whether those are anti-harassment trainings, anti-discrimination trainings in states that don't require them, whether it's other leadership or management trainings that reduce risk for your organization, whether it's specific steps that you can take during the interview process and or during the firing process to reduce risk, none of which are legally required, all of which reduce lawsuit risk. This is what that risk reduction library does, is it provides you a list of best practices by state, because that is different by state, in order to reduce your lawsuit risk and ensure that your company is on the path towards a lawsuit-free future. So step one is getting legally compliant, following the HR laws. If you're not following the HR laws, it's highly likely that you're going to get sued and or you're going to have issues with your employees. It's also just the wrong thing to do. And beyond that, the HR Law Made Easy platform has the risk reduction library, which allows you to then look at and consciously decide what additional things you want to do in order to reduce lawsuit risk and or risk for your employees and your organization. Welcome to HR Law Made Easy. We finally, for the first time, made following the law and reducing lawsuits easy.